You are not in love. You are hypnotized by your own shadow. This thing you call fate is nothing more than compulsion. It's your wound dressed in romance. It's the trauma you never faced, now using another body to continue destroying you. Carl Jung once said, "What you don't bring to consciousness comes back as destiny." And that's exactly what you call love. It's not love, it's addiction. You kneel before pain and call it passion. You mistake the chain for a hug. You call poison a miracle. And until you see this, you will continue to surrender to those who only exist to repeat the same tragedy. If you can't handle this truth, you can leave now. But if any part of you still wants to stop bleeding, stay. Because here we don't pretend, we don't sugarcoat, we don't soften. Here we tear off the mask of the unconscious and look at the wound until it really bleeds. Subscribe to the channel now, because what you're going to hear here, no one else has the courage to say. It's not love. It's a chemical rush. It's dopamine selling the illusion of eternity in exchange for a few stolen kisses. It's adrenaline transforming anxiety into passion. You call it destiny, but it's just the shadow lighting candles over your trauma. Carl Jung already knew, when the unconscious wants to be seen, it disguises itself as desire. And you believe it. You mistake the warmth in your chest for a meeting of souls. It's not a meeting. It's repetition. It's the wound that never healed, now wearing a different face to remind you of what you denied within yourself. Chemistry is treacherous. It promises freedom, but it imprisons. It intoxicates like cheap wine, intense at first, devastating the next day. You look to the other as if they were salvation, but it's just a reflection. It's just your fantasy projected onto someone who never asked to carry the weight of your loss. The spell of chemistry is cruel because it comes dressed as a miracle. But miracles don't hurt like that. Miracles free. This one binds, and the chain is invisible. Have you ever noticed that you're always attracted to the same type of person? The inaccessible, the one who plays games, the one who disappears and comes back. This isn't coincidence. It's addiction. Your body seeks in the other the pattern your mind calls love. But it's not love. It's trauma. It's abandonment wrapped in perfume. It's rejection disguised as seduction. The unconscious loves theater, and you buy a front row seat. Desire? No, it's compulsion. What you feel as chemistry is just the echo of a childhood where you learned to beg for affection. Now, as an adult, you confuse lack with intensity. And the more it hurts, the more you believe it's real. Because deep down, you don't want love, you want familiarity. The fire that burns you is the same one that burned before. Only the face has changed. Only the voice has changed. But the wound is still there, guiding the strings like a puppet. Chemistry isn't destiny. It's repetition choreographed by the unconscious. That's why the most intense relationships are also the most destructive. You think you found someone special, but all you've found is your own raw shadow. Attraction is just an old code firing, telling you there's something unresolved here. But you don't listen. You call a soulmate what in fact is just a mirror of your loneliness. You don't realize that that shiver isn't a light, it's an alarm. You don't realize that those butterflies in your stomach aren't butterflies. They're a warning of danger. Chemistry is a spell because it doesn't show its price right away. It shows it later, when you're already trapped, when you can no longer differentiate desire from destruction. Carl Jung said, "What you don't bring to consciousness returns as destiny." That's it. What you call destiny is just the unconscious dragging you down the same dark corridor. And this corridor will lead you to something even deeper. The mask of the animus and the anima. You don't fall in love with the person you see before your eyes. You fall in love with the image your unconscious paints of them. Carl Jung called them animus and anima, the archetypal forces we carry within and project outward. A man sees in a woman the lost goddess he never integrated. A woman sees in a man the hero she lacked in her childhood, and so no one sees anyone. They only see mirrors, distorted mirrors, reflecting what's missing within. You believe it's him, you swear it's her, but it's just the animus, just the anima, acting out the psychic theater. The worst part, you swear you chose, but it was the shadow who chose. It was the unconscious who pointed the finger. The other person's mask fits perfectly over your wound, and you call it compatibility. It's not. It's an illusion. It's a fantasy. You're not loving a person. You're loving what you'd like to be, but haven't had the courage to become. That's why passion blinds. Because it doesn't look at the other, it looks at its own neediness disguised as a body. When you project your animus, you believe you found someone strong, determined, protective. But in reality, you found someone who carries the same insecurity as you, only disguised. When you project your anima, you think you found the woman sweet, welcoming, sensitive, but maybe it's just someone trying to survive their own shadows. Projection is treacherous because it doesn't show who the other is. It shows who you wish they were. You create an edited, filtered, almost mystical version, and you live a fantasy that your unconscious sustains while the real is forgotten. It's as if you were dating a hologram, and a hologram doesn't embrace, doesn't care, doesn't save. It only reflects, until the day the reflection shatters, and when it shatters, you discover you never loved the person, you loved your own illusion. And this shock hurts more than rejection. The danger of the animus and anima mask is that it doesn't fall on its own. It falls when pain tears, when you realize that your soulmate also lies, also fails, also hurts. And it's at that moment that the unconscious laughs, because the lesson was never about the other, it was about you. Until you integrate these forces within, you will continue falling into impossible loves, desiring in the other what can only arise within you. You will seek in an embrace what should arise in your solitude. You will beg in kisses for what only your own soul could offer. What seems like love is just the shadow begging for recognition. And until you see this, you will continue believing in myths. You will continue confusing archetype with flesh. And the next step of this illusion is even more brutal. Love as a repetition of trauma. You call it passion, but it's reenactment. The unconscious doesn't want romance, it wants repetition. It takes the childhood wound, wraps it in desire, and delivers it like a poisoned gift. Carl Jung knew what isn't healed becomes a pattern. That's why you seek the same type of person as if doomed. It's not a choice, it's a compulsion. Trauma becomes a compass, and you don't even realize it. The abandoned child within you still waits for someone to return. The rejected child still dreams of being chosen, so you mistake pain for love. When someone ignores you, you feel alive. When someone humiliates you, you call it intensity. You don't realize that excitement is just the open wound being poked again. You call it chemistry, but it's just blood oozing from the same scar that never healed. The consuming passion is, in fact, trauma repeating the script until you learn to break it. See how cruel it is. The more someone hurts you, the more you cling. It sounds crazy, but it makes sense within the unconscious, because it doesn't want peace, it wants familiarity. If you grew up learning that love comes with cold silence, you'll seek partners who never speak their minds. If you learned that affection comes with violence, you'll be attracted to those who hurt. Not because you enjoy the pain, but because pain is the only language you've learned to call love. This is how trauma disguises itself. It puts on a fantasy of passion, a sparkle in the eyes, but underneath it's a chain. You're not searching for the other, you're searching for your lost childhood. It's not romance, it's emotional archaeology. You dig into someone else's chest for what was ripped from yours, and deep down, every relationship becomes a desperate attempt to rewrite the first wound. But every time you try, you bleed more, and still, you persist. The most perverse thing is that trauma doesn't warn you. It disguises itself as desire, as "I can't live without you." It says, "Now it'll be different." But in the end, it's always the same. Passion becomes a stage, and you act it out without realizing it. On one side, the fantasy of being saved. On the other, the reality of being destroyed. And in the midst of it all, the unconscious enjoys it, because it knows you haven't yet seen the pattern. Carl Jung said we are not free until we bring the unconscious to consciousness. Until that happens, you repeat and repeat, until you understand that love is not called to heal the past, but to free you from the cycle. But before reaching this awareness, you will go through the cruelest theater of all, that of seduction and power, where the shadow not only repeats, but manipulates. Seduction isn't about love, it's about power. When the shadow enters the scene, no one is interested in tenderness. They're interested in control. Carl Jung already knew what we repress returns as a mask, and the mask of seduction is the most dangerous of all, because it seems sweet, but it's poison. It seems surrender, but it's manipulation. The man who displays strength may hide fragility. The woman who acts fragile may hide fury. The game is never about affection, it's about dominance. It's about who makes the other run, beg, lose their balance. It's war disguised as romance, and every gesture is calculated by the unconscious, the prolonged silence, the promising look, the maddening absence. You believe you're in love, but you're being entangled in an invisible web. The shadow dances and you follow the rhythm without realizing it. It's theater, and the stage is always the same, your open wound, waiting to be used against you. The theater of seduction is cruel because it transforms desire into obsession. You think you're in control, but you've already lost. The other knows where to poke, knows how to awaken the illusion you most fear losing. The fantasy of being chosen, the illusion of being seen, and when the game begins, you enter voluntarily. No one forces you. You hand over your power like someone handing out flowers, and before you know it, you're trapped. This theater doesn't just happen in romances. It happens at work, in the family, even in spiritual contexts. There's always someone using the shadow's reflection to manipulate. The manipulator doesn't shout, they whisper. They don't demand, they withdraw. They don't trap, they seduce. And you follow, because the compulsion of trauma is stronger than reason. Desire becomes a chain, chemistry becomes a prison, and you call destiny what is merely an unconscious script, reenacted 1,000 times. It's on this stage that the shadow has the most fun, because it knows the game isn't about love, it's about domination. The wound becomes currency, trauma becomes a weapon, and every spoken word, every calculated gesture is used to keep you in the role of servant. Obsession isn't born of love, it's born of exploited need. And the more you fight to free yourself, the more trapped you become, because the play doesn't end when you leave the stage. It continues inside your mind. The words echo, the looks burn, and you replay the memories as if they were eternal. This is how the shadow transforms passion into a battlefield. And in this field, there are no winners, only the wounded. You leave believing you loved, but you were only manipulated. You leave believing you experienced something unique, but you only repeated the unconscious tragedy once again. And in the next act, what seemed like romance reveals itself for what it really is. Mirrors that hurt. Intense relationships are almost never encounters of souls. They are collisions of wounds. You think the other person came to heal you, but they only came to expose what you never wanted to see. Carl Jung said that everything we deny in ourselves reappears, disguised. That's why you feel that mixture of ecstasy and pain. The other person isn't salvation. They're a mirror of the rejection you hide, a mirror of the abandonment you swept under the rug, a mirror of the trauma you call love. And when you look at this reflection, you don't see the other person. You see yourself naked, unmasked, bleeding, but you can't bear to look. So you idealize, you fantasize, you create the illusion that it's deep love. But deep down you know it's pain disguised as destiny. The mirror doesn't save you. It hurts you because it forces you to face what you've been running from your entire life. That's why toxic relationships have so much power. Because they're not about the other person, they're about you versus yourself. Every cruel word is a blade that opens the same childhood wound. Every cold silence is a repetition of denied affection. Every rejection is a reminder of your childhood loneliness. The other person only holds the mirror, but the reflection is yours. And you insist on looking. Because part of you still believes that if you persist, you'll change the ending of the story. You'll transform pain into love, violence into affection, absence into presence. It's a lie. It's your unconscious trying to rewrite a script that never ends well. And the more you persist, the deeper the hole you dig. The mirror always returns the same image, that of your own shadow. It's not love that bleeds, it's your wound reflected mercilessly, and you call this intensity when it's just repetition. Mirrors that hurt don't just appear in romance novels. They appear in friendships, in families, even in spiritual paths. The manipulative leader, the controlling friend, the suffocating partner, they're all reflections. They're not there to destroy you, they're there to show you where you're already destroying yourself. It's brutal to acknowledge this, because it takes courage to admit that the pain you feel today is an echo of something much older. The mirror isn't evil, it's a revelation. But revelations hurt. And that's why you prefer to keep calling it love, because it's less scary than calling it trauma. But until you have the courage to face the reflection without running away, you'll continue believing in illusions. You'll continue to confuse bonds with chains. You'll continue to call obsession destiny, and the mirror won't disappear. On the contrary, it will multiply until you understand the next inevitable step, the invisible bond of compulsion. You believe you choose, but you don't. The unconscious chooses for you. It pulls the strings like an invisible puppeteer and you dance, believing you're free. It's called compulsion. The same pattern repeated on different faces, the same script played out on new stages. You think you're starting something new, but you're just replaying the same tragedy. Carl Jung said, "Until the unconscious is brought to light, it will rule your life, and you'll call it destiny." This is the invisible bond, the silent force that makes you chase those who reject you, beg for those who abandon you, love those who don't know how to love. It's not bad luck. It's not bad luck. It's a pattern. It's the shadow begging to be seen. But because you don't look, it binds you, and the more you resist, the tighter the knot tightens. Love becomes a chain, desire becomes a prison. And you call this prison choice. The cruelest thing about the invisible bond is that it hides beneath the feeling of freedom. You believe you're in love, but you're only obeying an ancient command. You think it was choice, but it was compulsion. The unconscious knows exactly where to capture you. It recognizes the wound and places it before you. The rejected child always finds someone incapable of surrendering. The abandoned child always finds someone who threatens to leave. You repeat it because you believe this time will be different, but it never is, because it's not about the other person, it's about you. The bond isn't in the other person's body, it's in yours. It's trapped in your desire to rewrite the past. And as long as you passionately try to correct what arose from trauma, you'll always be entangled, always trapped, always hostage to an old story that continues to dictate the chapters of the present. This invisible bond is so strong because it feeds on what you hide. It feeds on your shame, your loneliness, your fear of not being loved. It knows that all it takes is a gesture, a calculated absence, for you to come running back. It's compulsion disguised as love. It's prison disguised as freedom. And no one told you that the more you fight it, the deeper you sink, because the bond doesn't loosen by pulling. It unravels by looking, by staring, by recognizing that it's not love, but trauma. That it's not desire, but repetition. That it's not destiny, but unconscious compulsion. But before they see this, many remain trapped. And trapped not because someone holds them, but because they can't let go. And in this silent imprisonment, the cruelest phase is born. The addiction to pain disguised as love. You're not addicted to the person. You're addicted to the sensation. Your body learns to confuse pain with love, absence with desire, rejection with intensity. And you always return to the same place, like someone returning to the drug they've destroyed so many times. Carl Jung knew that the shadow infiltrates precisely those places where the psyche doesn't distinguish pleasure from hurt. You believe you can't live without the other person, but in reality, you can't live without the emotional pattern that dominates you. The addiction isn't to the kiss or the touch. The addiction is to the adrenaline of losing, the anguish of waiting, the temporary relief when you finally receive crumbs. It's chemistry, but it's also trauma. The unconscious creates an emotional casino, and you play your chips, believing that this time you'll win. But you never win, because the roulette wheel is rigged, and the prize is always the same: more pain. That's why so many people return to relationships that have already destroyed them. It's not love, it's withdrawal. The other person's silence hurts like a hangover. Their return feels like anesthesia. It's a cycle of addiction. You call it longing, but it's a craving. You call it passion, but it's a chemical compulsion. Desire is confused with need, and trauma disguises itself as romance. The unconscious knows this game better than you do. It turns on the dopamine light, unleashes the weight of oxytocin, and you race like a lab rat after the same drop of pleasure. But the price is always pain. The addiction to pain disguised as love is cruel because it never satisfies. The more you receive, the more you need. The more you give, the emptier you become. Because it's not love that feeds. It's wound that consumes, and the more you consume, the hungrier you become. The most perverse thing about this addiction is that it deceives even the most lucid. You can read spirituality books, study Carl Jung, meditate for hours, and still fall into the trap. Because it's not reason, it's the body. It's not logic, it's unconscious. You don't seek the person themselves, you seek the familiarity of pain. And that's why, even after promising never to return, you do. Your heart beats, but not with love, with compulsion. Your mind creates justifications, but your body has already decided. It's like any addiction. You believe you're in control, but you're controlled. And like any addiction, there are only two ways out: face it or repeat it. Until you face the wound head-on, you'll continue to call the pain love. And this deception will keep you trapped. But the call of conscience always arrives, and it asks, where does your desire come from, after all? There comes a time when the pain can no longer be contained. The body screams, the mind collapses, the soul falls silent. That's when the call of conscience arises. It's not a soft voice, it's a blow, a rupture. Carl Jung said that conscience begins when we stop projecting. And projecting is everything you've done up until now. You've thrown your shadow onto the other, called trauma love, transformed wound into fantasy. The call asks, where does your desire come from? From wholeness or lack? From the self or the wound? It's brutal to face this, because it means admitting that perhaps you never loved, that perhaps you only used the other as anesthetic for your pain. Conscience doesn't forgive illusions. It tears off the masks, burns away the disguises, and leaves you naked before your own truth. There is no romance here. There is confrontation. And it is in this confrontation that the possibility of freedom finally begins. The call of conscience doesn't happen in temples or sacred books. It happens in the silence of your insomnia, in the emptiness after a fight, in the pent-up tears in the bathroom. It's in these moments that the soul asks, how long? How long will you confuse pain with love? How long will you live chained to patterns you already know by heart? Spirituality isn't escape. It's confrontation. It's looking at the unconscious without looking away. It's seeing the shadow and not trembling. It's feeling the trauma and not running away. It's admitting that the desire that seemed sacred was just a compulsion in disguise. Conscience doesn't promise immediate peace. It promises discomfort, but this discomfort is a sign of healing, because as long as the wound remains hidden, you remain a slave. Only when it's exposed to the light does it begin to heal, but few can bear this glare, because it blinds before it illuminates. The call of conscience isn't romantic, it's devastating. It rips away the pleasure of blaming others and returns responsibility. It says, it's not the other who holds you back, it's you who won't let go. It's not the other who repeats, it's you who returns. It's not destiny that chooses, it's the unconscious that dictates. And in that moment, the burning question is, will you stay asleep or will you wake up? Will you continue feeding the addiction to pain, or will you cut the bond that has always bound you? This is the watershed, because conscience isn't final, it's a portal. It's the beginning of a journey that Jung called individuation, the process of integrating shadow, anima, animus, wound, and desire into something greater. And whoever hears this call knows the journey is painful, but it's the only true path. Individuation isn't the pretty poetry of a spiritual book, it's surgery without anesthesia. It's looking in the mirror and seeing not only the light, but all the darkness you've always fled from. Jung said that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but rather by becoming conscious of the darkness. The journey begins when you stop blaming others and accept everything that holds me back is within. The animus, the anima, the shadow, the traumas, they all sit at the table and demand to be heard. It's uncomfortable, it's brutal, it's visceral. You discover that the person you thought was your love was just your projection. You discover that desire wasn't born of the self, but of the wound. You discover that the illusions you held were just attempts at anesthesia. And when you face this, there's no mask left, only the raw truth. And this truth isn't gentle. It rips the ground from under you and forces you to rebuild from scratch, from within. Individuation is crossing the abyss with no guarantee of grounding. It's losing the identities you built to survive, the strong one, the good one, the one who always gives in, the one who always fights. It's facing the fact that all of this was just defense, not essence. The shadow demands integration. The animus and anima demand reconciliation. Trauma needs to be named. Only then does the unconscious stop silently directing your life. But this crossing hurts, because you say goodbye to old illusions, and the ego hates losing. It prefers the fantasy of toxic love to conscious solitude. It prefers the illusion of chemistry to the peace that comes with wholeness. Individuation requires you to kill parts of yourself so that the self can be reborn. And there's no guarantee of applause. No one will applaud your internal process. No one will validate your pain. It's you against the mirror. And only when you cross over do you understand it was the only way. The journey of individuation is not quick. It's ritual. It's a fall and a rebirth. It's a dark night and a dawn. It's a death to fantasy and a rebirth to reality. You learn that true love isn't an addiction, it's a choice. That desire isn't a compulsion, it's an expression of wholeness. That spirituality isn't an escape, it's presence. And that the wound wasn't a curse, it was an invitation. Everything you rejected transforms into strength. Everything you hid becomes a foundation. But until you get there, pain is inevitable. Because the shadow doesn't integrate without blood, And this blood is symbolic. It's the ego that dies, not you. Individuation is a birth of the soul. You scream, you bleed, you tear, but in the end, something new is born. Something whole, something free. And this birth isn't the end of the journey. It's just preparation for the final stage, the serenity of true love. Real love has no fireworks, no butterflies, no chains. Real love doesn't scream, doesn't beg, doesn't bind. It isn't born from trauma. It's born from the self. That's why so few find it, because most still confuse intensity with truth. Carl Jung knew that as long as the unconscious dictates choices, love will be compulsion, never serenity. The chaos of toxic passion is addictive because it fills the void with drama. But true love doesn't fill, it expands. It doesn't create obsession, it brings peace. And this peace is frightening, because those who have lived through pain believe that calm is boredom. The shadow makes you believe that if it doesn't hurt, it isn't real. But that's a lie. Real love doesn't hurt. It doesn't manipulate, it doesn't repeat. It isn't born from wounds, it's born from healing. It isn't prison, it's freedom. And only those who have lived through chaos can recognize this silence as victory. Real love begins when you stop looking for saviors and learn to save yourself. It doesn't depend on lack, it depends on wholeness. It's not born of compulsive desire, but of presence. That's why it's so rare, because it demands individuation. It demands that you integrate shadow, wound, trauma, fantasy, until you can no longer project. Real love doesn't need a spectacle because it has no audience. It doesn't need games because it's not afraid of losing. It doesn't need masks because it has nothing to hide. The serenity of true love is brutal because it shatters all the illusions you've harbored up until now. You discover that loving isn't begging, it's choosing. That loving isn't begging, it's being. That loving isn't despair, it's calm. And this calm isn't apathy, it's fulfillment. But to reach it, you have to let die everything you once called love. The chaos of toxic passion is a consuming fire. True love is a warming hearth. Chaos binds with fear. True love liberates with silence. Chaos feeds on wounds. True love blossoms from healing. But no one reaches this love without going through the hell of their own shadow. You must die to the addiction of pain. You must look at the unconscious without anesthesia. You must strip away fantasies one by one until only the essence remains. And in this essence, you discover that love was never about the other. It was always about your reconciliation with yourself. The other is only a reflection, only a mirror, only an extension. When you find serenity, you realize you no longer need to beg, no longer need to run, no longer need to betray yourself, because you finally understand. True love is not a storm, it is a harbor, and whoever finds it never again accepts returning to chaos. Have you noticed what you call love is just your wound disguised as destiny? And until you have the courage to face it, you will repeat the same cycle until you destroy yourself. So tell me, how long will you call a chain a hug? How long will you confuse addiction with passion? How long will you allow your unconscious to dictate the script of your life? The truth is simple and brutal. No one will save you. Either you face the shadow or it will continue to choose for you. You can run away one more time, turn off that video and pretend you didn't hear anything. But you can also stay and start tearing off the mask altogether. The choice was never about the other. It was always about you. And if this cut you up inside, then this is where you need to be. Subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications, because this is just the first cut, and the next ones will hurt even more.